All right, Chapter 10, the respiratory system. So we're going to start off with an overview of the respiratory system, and here we go. So what are the essential functions to the respiratory system? Ultimately, what the respiratory system does is it gives us oxygen. Why do we care about oxygen? Why do we care about bringing oxygen in and releasing carbon dioxide? Well, it's because cells need ATP. When we talked about human cells at the sort of the cellular level, we talked about mitochondria and how mitochondria produce ATP, our energy currency. It's the energy that our cells need to produce so many different metabolic functions to move molecules across the plasma membrane, to allow the transportation of vesicles and molecules within the cytoplasm. ATP is hugely important, and without oxygen, there is no ATP. I mean, there is from fermentation, but as we talked about, fermentation is highly inefficient and also toxic to cells if we allow the buildup of those byproducts. So oxygen is so important, thus respiration is very important. So the whole process of respiration is we breathe in oxygen, we transfer that oxygen to our red blood cells, the red blood cells carry that oxygen to our body cells, the red blood cells drop off oxygen. That oxygen is then used to produce ATP through the burning of our glucose molecules, or that process of cellular respiration, breaking those glucose molecules down into carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. Once we get to the cells, our circulatory system is responsible for picking carbon dioxide up from the body cells, carrying it back to the lungs, and then respiring. The lungs, the respiratory system takes over, and we breathe out carbon dioxide. Now, these gases are going to move in and out via simple diffusion. So if you don't remember, take some time to go back to our earlier slides and refresh yourself on simple diffusion. That's simply the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. This process, or actually I'm going to have you look this up or see if you can remember, does this process of diffusion require the input of energy? All right, so that's going to be a huge important function of the respiratory system. There are additional functions of the respiratory system. While it does provide our body with essential oxygen needed to extract our energy from food, it also gets rid of that carbon dioxide, that waste product. But a very important aspect of this is to help regulate the acid-base balance of our body fluids, which we'll get into a little bit later. So here is the human respiratory tract, just sort of a pathway of it. We start off with the nose and the mouth. This is where we can intake oxygen. So the nose and the mouth are both going to converge back here into the pharynx. From the pharynx, we're going to pass down into the larynx. The larynx is going to be this region right in here, also known as our voice box. This is where we're able to produce sound when we are speaking. From the pharynx into the larynx, from the larynx into the trachea, from the trachea down into the bronchial tree, and from the bronchial tree into the alveoli in the lungs. Now we're going to break down each one of these parts, but here's just sort of an overview. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to look at this picture or look at this figure and talk through what is happening at each one of these stages and trace the flow of oxygen into the body and carbon dioxide out of the body. So this is an excellent figure. I do recommend that you spend a little bit of time with it. All right, and that's it for this section. You should just be able to trace the path of air from the nasal cavities into the lungs, explain how the flow of air differs during inspiration and expiration, and describe the functions of the respiratory system. Focus on these first one and this third one, tracing the path of air from the nasal cavities to the lungs and describing the functions of the respiratory system. We're going to focus quite a bit on inspiration and expiration in a later section. So that'll be coming up. For now, just focus on tracing the path of air from the nasal cavities to the lungs and describing the functions of the respiratory system.